So as you were describing what your day-to-day looks like, at some point you mentioned you decided to stop pursuing competing against these big monsters in the industry. Tell me more about that.
Not so much competing, but not making my goal expansion. I think that is a trap, not a trap. Let's say it's a question that every successful concept owner gets to a point that they have to answer that question for themselves and for their business. And at the time that I said yes to that, it was a very different environment. And both, from the point that there was still so much runway and opportunity, where I think those doors have closed a lot for a lot of reasons, but the cost of expansion has continued to rise, making it even more difficult to succeed in expansion.
Hi, welcome to Deep Current by Oceans. I'm your host, Kaylor. This is the show built for people who actually run operations, the leaders who make everything else possible behind the scenes. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Gavigan. She's the chef and founder at Otaku Ramen in Nashville. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
So, Sarah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your career and how you ended up here.
So have been in multiple careers. I started in Los Angeles, fell in love with film production, and just loved that heavy pace, fast paced kind of creativity. And that really was a jumping off point for a lot of different things for me. After that, I started a company that placed music in commercials. So I licensed artists' music to commercials like Apple and Target. And, it was really fun. Got to write a lot of really big checks to a lot of really small artists. And then I got out of entertainment altogether and relocated to Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm from originally. And my foodie dream, it kind of played out at that point. I was a really obsessed home cook for the majority of my life and fell in love with Japanese food and Japanese culture when I lived in Los Angeles. When I came back to Tennessee, that wasn't really present here at all. So there was an opportunity to be the first ramen shop in Nashville. And we have been open for 10 years now.
So, Sarah, tell our listeners about the operation. What does it look like? What's the scale? How many people you typically see, and how your team is structured?
So we have a management group that oversees both locations. We did attempt an expansion here in Nashville, like everyone else, and we backed off of that. Just with current conditions, it didn't really feel right at all. But Nashville is I think, in a unique position right now. I don't know, maybe the whole country's overdeveloping, but Nashville is uniquely overdeveloping. So currently we have two locations, one in Nashville that's full service and one in Franklin that is counter service. And we've been, I think ramen has been a point of curiosity as a category in hospitality for a lot of people in the industry. I think private equity is still trying to figure out if it's worth a go. There's not really a clear leader in the industry yet. And I made a really distinctive choice about a year ago to stop chasing that.
Wow. Okay. There's so much to unpack there. Before we get there, please tell me, what does a typical week look like for you personally? What are you actually spending your time on?
So 10 years in, I have an operating partner who's our director of operations who manages everything on the store levels. My job is really financial and marketing, even though I am the founder and the chef. The thing about a ramen shop is that once you set your recipes in place, the name of the game is do not change. So my role as a chef has really shifted in that my job is really to maintain supply chain, which these days can be really challenging, especially when you're bringing in a lot of Japanese imports. So I am very often working on those problems from the point of let's say that we have a certain product that's been distributed to us and all of a sudden that tariff shoots up and I can no longer afford to bring that product in. I have to reverse engineer it with products that I can find here in the United States. So I spend a lot of my time doing that these days. And I think that marketing is changing so rapidly, as you know, attention used to be the number one category in marketing. Now it's visibility. And so I have, had a much larger team at one point, but right now with all of these changes, I've decided to kind of come back down to a very small team so that I can have my hands on the business a lot more day to day. As someone that comes from a marketing background, I kind of have a tendency to see what's coming down the pike. And I really find that, especially with AI today, I'm able to manage about $120,000 worth of marketing contracts. I don't have to pay for those anymore.
Mhm. So, as you were describing what your day to day looks like, at some point you mentioned you decided to stop pursuing competing against these big monsters in the industry. Tell me more about that.
Not so much competing, but not making my goal expansion. I think that is a trap. Not a trap. Let's say it's a question that every successful concept owner gets to a point that they have to answer that question for themselves and for their business. And at the time that I said yes to that, it was a very different environment. And both, from the point that there was still so much runway and opportunity where I think those doors have closed a lot for a lot of reasons, but the cost of expansion has continued to rise, making it even more difficult to succeed in expansion. Whether you're rounding up investors or you are self-funding, the framework that really successful private equity have in our industry is somewhat untenable. And, gunning for those metrics is awesome, but you make certain decisions that you would not otherwise make if you are not in a growth cycle.
Mhm. So, what's the main driver behind that? Do you feel it comes from a place of, is it budget, for example? Is it personal time or personal investment? That there could be many reasons why, and you're describing a few of why you would choose not to pursue expansion. But what's really the main one if you had to name one?
I think the main one is the environment, small business environment is, the margins have gotten so thin, that it's really truly more double the risk than it was when I started 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And I think for me, I am an entrepreneur through and through. I have been started my first company at 24 years old, sold it at 30. So I definitely am getting to a point where I'm like, how much risk is really responsible for me? And I think that we've been very successful at doing what we do. And just doing that, I believe, is enough for me at this time. And it's hard because you want to expand for your employees, you want to give them more opportunity. But I think until, we can get on a better track as a country for how we're going to continue to develop, um, Nashville has a very particular problem. Um, Metro is funded by property tax. And Nashville has expanded so quickly, has developed so fast that it can no longer support itself. And so the property taxes just went up 300%. So my CAM now represents almost half of my occupancy. Those are not statistics that you can survive.
Yeah. That's it's crazy how things have changed. What do you think are the main drivers behind these changes?
I think the drivers behind the changes are the mentality of a boom town that is all about more, more, more. Get it while I can get it fast, get it. Doesn't matter how I get it, just get it. And we being the independent restaurants of Nashville, started seeing this a group of us were like, wait a minute. This does not look good for us at all. And we didn't even know how bad it was going to be. I mean, for example, there is, the honky tonks in Nashville. It's what Nashville's famous for, right? Lower Broadway. Those buildings have been bought and developed and sold and reappraised so many times that the appraisal took one leaseholder who is one of the most successful honky tonks on Lower Broadway, an owner that has been there since the 80s, from $150,000 a year in property tax to $600,000 a year in property tax. It's untenable. I feel like my responsibility as someone with a lot of battle scars in this business is to talk about these difficult things, is not to talk about how great my story is and how everything turned out. You can bring anybody on this podcast to do that. What I think is necessary for people to understand now is if you're going to open a restaurant, you have to look at the political climate, the taxes, and a 10-year runway. You have to look at what your rent is potentially going to cost you with that property tax if you live in a city like that. We could not have ever imagined that our CAM would be almost as expensive as our rent.
Right. That there's so much more that we could resurface here. I want to go back to make sure I'm not missing this. You mentioned also that there are things that are beyond your control. And of course there are, like tariffs bring the price of ingredients up and then you're forced to pivot and rethink how you do it. So tell me more about what are those things that are beyond your control. And the reason I'm asking that question is I want to follow it up with what are those that you still feel are very much within your control that you're satisfied with?
Well, I think the things that are out of my control are taxes, environment, the amount of tourists that come to Nashville every year. Those are all things that are out of my control. The amount of restaurants that open every year in Nashville, that is out of my control. And just for reference, we have 10 times the amount of restaurants that we did 5 years ago. So those are all the things I can't control. What I can control is my brand story, my reputation, and my food quality and my experience. And as much as any owner doesn't want to hear this, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. The rest of it is noise. Profitability, obviously, is important. But I think that a lot of operators out there today are like, let's just get through this, whatever this is, and then we'll decide what we're going to do next.
Mm-hmm. I had another guest discuss similar challenges. He owns a property, up north, and what he was saying that it stuck with me is that there's so much more. Like there's a limit to how much you can increase prices when things go up. So I'm very curious about how you personally approach that. How do you balance being able to increase your prices so that margins stay somewhat healthy without putting that big of a burden on the customers so that they'll stop coming?
Well, it's becoming a fallacy for one very interesting reason. We started our brand as the first dedicated ramen shop in Nashville. So scarcity was my marketing tactic. I had the thing that nobody else had, right? Now, because of market conditions and because of our reliability, we have a very flush to go program. Ramen in Japan to go is verboten, but I took a very brave step in 2021 or in 2020 into doing to go, and we do it very, very well. And our reliance on third party has also gotten to a point where to do business with them, you have to become a value driven brand, not a scarcity driven brand. So when you talk about what is the appetite that a guest will take for raising prices, how much does that matter when I have to raise the price so that you can get a free bowl of ramen? Like, these are the metrics that we have to work with now. Uber, great, I can bring you more business, but you're going to have to give away half of it to get it. So I think one of the big problems that I see coming down the pike is that operators are looking for more sales, but you're getting less profit for more sales. That's where our industry is moving. And that is really difficult to battle. Once you get into that position, you can't really put the genie back in the bottle. You can't go from being a scarcity brand to a value brand to a scarcity brand. You got to stay where you are. And once you get valuized, it's a whole new business model. So for the first 8 years, 9 years, we were 100% driven by the idea of scarcity. We would intentionally run out of food to
Wow.
create that psychology. We're
Got
out,
it.
sold out, got to come tomorrow. Sorry. To where now I have to give away a bowl of ramen through Uber to keep my growth, but my profitability is going down because when I sell a bowl of ramen through Uber, I make 55 cents to the dollar.
Okay. I was just going to ask you about the margins. You just laid it out very clearly. So when you refer to go, is that like the express service like Uber and DoorDash? And is that what you're referring to, or is it a
Well, we
different
do
type
to
of?
go in two different ways. So to go to us means pick up and delivery. So anything that is not a dine in. And we use Toast Online, and then Uber takes it the last mile, and they can come through our front door, which is preferred, and that's a flat fee, or they come through the Uber Eats front door where I get a commission and I'm required to do a discounted price on my food to draw sales. When the majority of the people that are taking advantage of that value are never going to be my customers. They are only driven by value. That is their only driver. Impossible to convert, will always see your product as worth 55 cents on the dollar.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the problems that I see that are like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Once those problems happen, they happen like cataclysmically, not just to my brand, but to brands at large. Like you have to ask yourself, like how, if you're going to be a scarcity brand, how do you stay a scarcity brand? How do you grow and stay in that psychological mindset from marketing and hospitality experience? It's almost impossible to do in these conditions.
Right. I was actually gonna say that. Like, can you even can you even stay a scarcity brand? But if I can ask and unpack that a little further, um, do you know how much of your sales are, let's say, pick up versus delivery versus dining in?
Yeah. No, I mean, we do about 30% to go. We always have.
Okay. So you feel like that's stayed relatively similar over the years?
No, it's definitely gone more and more to go,
Hmm.
which is another thing we couldn't have foreseen. I think when COVID hit, March 15th, the world shut down. That same day, we had an entire pallet of custom design to go wear land on our front doorstep. So we were uniquely prepared for that moment. And we did extremely well. We had comfort food that people wanted during COVID. And so we got a tremendous amount of new customers. We got probably the highest new customer acquisition percentage we will ever get in a concentrated amount of time, during that year. And I think many of them have never dined in. They've only dined with us to go.
Hmm.
So that was not something that we could have planned or foreseen. That was not a plan. That was just how it occurred, how it rolled out.
Right. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Sarah, tell me, what's the hardest part of your job right now? Not of your operation, but you personally.
I think when you build a brand from your heart with passion, it's so personal. And this is something that isn't personal at all. So separating those things is the real challenge because it's your baby. You've created it from nothing. And it's hard to imagine that it wouldn't exist, but it becomes more and more of a possibility. But I think that the chances of it surviving are tied to so many other people's survival that that is the hardest part.
Mhm. Let me throw you a curveball here because I think this is such a candid response. What is currently your best plan for this to continue, for you to be able to keep this business running? What's your strategy?
We have to drive back to dine in. That is the key. I mean, at the sales we have now, if we could make more money, we could be great. It's not the sales, it's the profitability. So it's almost like starting over. But you have all this reputation and 10 years of reputation behind you. And the idea is that you have to become the shiny new penny all over again, right? How do you do that? That seems impossible to do. But there is this kind of unique moment happening in Nashville where the overdevelopment has brought every Tom, Dick, and Harry to Nashville to open a restaurant. And people are getting a little fed up with all of these out of town people and big out of town corporations coming in and pushing out small businesses because they're driving up the cost of doing business. So I think one of my greatest talents has always been to kind of spot those moments before they happen and respond to them and use them as opportunities to get my brand into the conversation, you know? I think it's really interesting. Like when we first started in Nashville, we were the beneficiary of so much PR because there weren't that many people taking risks yet. And, white middle-aged housewife makes Japanese ramen. That's an interesting story. And so, you are able to build a new customer base because of scarcity, but also because of the PR machine. And then once you go from 40 restaurants to 400, then that game changes completely. And you can no longer, once you go from 1 unit to 2 units, you can't make the listicles anymore. And so you lose a big part of your visibility. So I think that my job right now is to make sure that even though we're not the shiny new penny, that we're as visible as we can be and that we play a certain role in people's lives. I had always looked at that through what am I going to make it to them? Now it's what is it to you and how can I reflect that? So I can't tell people how to feel anymore. It's been 10 years. So we're in this like transitional phase of we can't exist in this direction in this way anymore. So what can we do to pivot that would increase our chances of profitability and kind of reconstitute our ability to draw new customers without valuizing our company into the ground?
Mhm. Profitability, I think, is the key to the rest of the conversation here. So let me flip the ground a little bit and then, jump into the bottom line. So let's talk about that for a moment. Um, and I know this is a pivot, but I'm very interested in how you're also looking at that as you move ahead. So one thing that I hear very consistently from operators in hospitality is that systems are kind of a problem, right? Every vendor they work with, they promise integration. Most, when you have in this case, you only have one location, but still, like you might be reconciling things manually. Your team might still be doing things in a way that feels a little bit archaic, or that there could be a more efficient, automated way to do that, which allows you to recover time for them to be more productive and therefore, ultimately bring value to the business. Is that your reality, or do you feel that you've gotten past that part of integration of your
Oh,
systems, of everything you use?
I spend so much time chasing vendors over integration issues. I mean, Toast accidentally deleted my entire 5-year guest book out of the blue about a month ago. 5 years, 50,000 contacts, poof, gone, all of it. That in itself is an ungodly, unfortunate problem, right? Just that one thing alone. It took me over 100 hours of customer support back and forth to get it back. That's 100 hours of my time just to get back what was already mine. I mean, vendors get worse the bigger they get, and your rights get worse the bigger they get. So I mean, one of the greatest things about AI is that you can run any contract through it, tell it any scenario, and it can give you more clarifying response than a very expensive attorney. I probably shouldn't say that, but don't make any legal decisions based on AI, but you can use it to guide you if you have a hunch about what is or isn't legal. I just had to go through this with a third-party vendor. third-party delivery vendor that I will not say their name because they did the right thing, but they accidentally turned off our software for 5 days. 5 days of sales turned off accidentally. The old me would have gotten upset, not called my lawyer because it would have cost too much, and just told myself that there was nothing I could do. I ran that contract through AI, talked to it for an hour, came up with 3 approaches, ended up getting paid back by that vendor. So I think that the chase is still there and that the mess ups are bigger than ever, but you do have options. It's unfortunate, but you have to fight harder than ever. I fight like, the old joke of like, every single bit of food comes out of that Cambro, right? Not the spatula gets cleaned twice, like nothing left behind. That mentality should be the same with your vendors. You should fight over $1. You should. And I used to think that that wasn't true, but I spend a good portion of my time doing that now. I comb through every single charge every single week. And if I see a charge that I don't recognize, I go after it. Or if it doesn't look right to me, I go after it. And I end up saving us a lot of money because of it. And that's not really the work of a bookkeeper. That's really the work of a founder with 2 shops, is to catch those small things. I'm very, very close to my books. I think that a lot of people are not. A lot of founders are not. They'll say, oh, that's just not my thing. I have a bookkeeper, I have an accountant. I have always maintained that if you can't tell me what your food costs were last month after 3 martinis, you have no business being in this business. Like, you should know your margins at all times. It should not be I have to call my accountant. No, burned in your brain, because that's what you're battling against every day is your margin. How can I improve it? Like, you can only improve sales so much. You can only improve new customers so much. So it used to be like we would go after a problem and just focus on that one problem. But now we have to focus on all the problems at once, because you're only going to make small gains in every column. That's the only thing that rises the boat. So it feels like you could go after problems a little bit more efficiently than we used to be able to, which is ironic, right? Because all of these vendors are promising you efficiency. So I find that to be honestly one of the most annoying things about where we're going as an industry and where technology is taking us. But on the flip side of that, AI is my advisor. I have gotten more solid, sane advice from working with AI than I did in paying $3,000 a month to an advisor. So I think we do have more tools to fight the battles. You just have to be more engaged. And that was a big change for me. I was out in front drafting, breaking wind for the rest of the team, and then telling everybody what I needed from them. Now there's, only operators are behind me. I run the whole show.
Okay. So there's so much that you said there, but I'm very curious about one thing. You said you lost 500 customers, something like that, a database of 500 customers. Did I hear you correctly?
50,000.
50,000. So what does that cost you? Try to put it in terms that are quantifiable for the people that, I know that, operators hearing this, maybe many of them are already assigning numbers to that. But from a qualitative and quantitative perspective for you, how much did that cost?
So I did take it to my attorney. I did look into litigation if I would have had to have gone down that road. And I did use that as a strategy in trying to get this data back, making sure that their engineers didn't just give up. It was worth over $500,000.
And that's potential sales. That is your customer data. How do you quantify something like that?
It's very difficult to quantify, which is why it's very expensive to take to litigation.
Mm-hmm.
So there are not there's not a lot of precedents in the industry for something like that. And if there is, they don't want you to see it. So, but it's real. It's your data, right? And we're all in data wars now. And so I would really recommend to anyone on that platform that you frequently download and archive frequently. So
how are you leveraging Oh, sorry,
What's that?
Sarah. How are you leveraging that data? What were you doing with that customer data on your day to day, week to week, month to month decision making process?
We started leaning very hard into loyalty and fully integrated email campaigns again. Um, One thing that Toast has done very well is their marketing essentials. I mean, it's not perfect, but the loyalty integration and the email integration is pretty swift. And, when you're look, I mean, we have a database of over 30,000 on our email list. You go to like Emma or Clavio, that's $6,000 a month. It's $175 a month at Toast. So the value system that Toast has created for that data inside that system is real. And so you can track ROI specifically. And that I think is extremely valuable to be able to say, okay, I spent $100 getting this email created and it brought me $7,000 in sales. Okay, well, that's a great return. I'm going to do more of that. And 50% of it was based on loyalty. So we're seeing that people are really responding to loyalty. And we're seeing that that's helping them come through our front door and not the third party front door. Now, not everybody is going to see as much value in our loyalty system as they do in the third party loyalty system because they have more choices on that loyalty system. But the Toast platform allows you to explore that, which I think is really undervalued and that operators should really look into that. But again, are you a scarcity model or are you a value model? So don't go down the loyalty road unless you are certain that you can be successful as a value driven company. Because when you watch your comps and discounts go from 2% to 10% because your loyalty program was so successful, you just have to be prepared for that. You're giving away more of the margin to get the sales. This seems to be the theme these days.
hmm So you're talking to me about how on top of margins you are and how on top of numbers, even the data from your customers. Where do you see all of this? I mean, when you or somebody from your team are looking at where the operation stands and you want to know how healthy you are, how healthy you were this week, this month, maybe even this day, what systems are you in? What are you looking at?
I mean, in 2026, I'm happy with I want a flat line. Give me a flat line, please. Um, that's really what I'm tracking. I'm tracking um that as like from a marketing aspect, first of all, obviously P&L, right? Like cash flow, P&L, number one, can't operate without cash. Number two, from a marketing point of view, I am razor focused on consistent new customer acquisition because it's the only way that I can battle the new customer, loyal customer mix, right? Because as Nashville gets more and more restaurants, people are, even if they love us dearly, they have more choices. They're going to come to us less simply because they have more choices. So, coming from that point of view, after being in the position of scarcity for 8 years, I'm tracking numbers through how many new customers do I have coming through my POS? How am I communicating with them? And did they become a loyal customer? That's what I'm tracking.
Mhm.
That conversion. Those
But
3 points.
where are you looking at? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it a report that somebody shares with you? Is it
It's a combination of numbers that I built a dashboard to track. And I track it every week. I base it on engagement on social. I base it on specific emails and ROI on those emails. Same thing for SMS. So because again, the Toast email loyalty system, if they are telling us the truth, those numbers on ROI are very engaging and very telling. And rather than spending $6,000 for a full CRM, doing it inside of Toast allows you to track your ROI so that, you know, also we don't run ads anymore. Ad spend is a loss leader now. Like you're just basically competing with people with bigger budgets than you. So what's the point? So I think the numbers that I'm looking at the most are literally in Toast. how many new customers did I get this month or this week? Then I isolate those exact customers and I cross-reference it with, are they in loyalty? Did they join loyalty? The next step, how many times have they come back in 60 days, 90 days? So I'm constantly tracking that new customer, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day. And I'm taking the majority of that information from my POS and I'm cross-referencing it against any marketing engagement that I have or any like events, or let's say that I invested in a local influencer and I gave them a bigger portion of a gift card than I normally would to come in and get some fresh eyes on the place, right?
What's your
So
POS, by the way? Sorry.
what's that?
Your POS, what are you using?
Toast.
Okay, yeah. Mhm. I thought it was
So
a different, that you had a different system. Sounds like that's
no,
your system.
we've been with Toast for about 5 years.
Mhm.
So, we made that switch and I think, I think that is another place we're going to start to see some proliferation, if I'm being honest. I think that there are going to be I'm waiting for like another player like Square to enter the market.
Okay. What are you waiting for? Like, what's the differentiator there for you?
Well, it would be nice to do business with a company that's not publicly traded because they have different markers for success. And because I think that as these companies grow and get bigger, as I said, where you're so reliant on your data to succeed, to continue to grow. But really, the levers to be pulled are the cost of doing business with the platform, the transaction fees, and the software fees. Those are going up incrementally pretty much every day. And you can't just say that that is because of inflation. They're a publicly traded company. They want more bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's spot on. Definitely. So, Sarah, another topic, because I want to make sure that we can get through this as well, particularly and take advantage of your knowledge here, is the F&B part. When you were describing, just before we started talking about the bottom line, you were also describing food cost and how people should have their finger on the pulse of things like that, and what is their food cost and the efficiency relative to the rest of the operation. So, and I also see the widest gap there between what operators know is happening versus what's actually happening. I think you're spot on as well with that. So, how do you manage things like inventory and ordering right now, for example? Is there a system? Is it largely judgment and historical feel? Tell me more.
Yeah, I think that if you have just one unit that manually tracking your food costs and your inventory is completely reasonable, unless you are carrying more than $20,000 a month in inventory. If you're carrying more than that, you got to get more exact. That's when things start to walk out the door. So the difference to me is like an operator who's just using QuickBooks and then manually taking their inventory, and those invoices that you buy your food with, they're just getting lump summed into your food cost. And then you're taking your sales and dividing it into what you've spent minus your inventory. The end, right? But the next step from that, which if you are a restaurant that never changes your menu, it's quite simple. But if you are a restaurant that is constantly changing your menu, this is a little bit more complicated, which is the operations side of the accounting programs, which is that it's going to recipe cost every single one of your menu items. And you're going to upload your invoices every time an invoice walks in the door for food and for supplies. And it's going to match it and map it out to everything. And it's going to give you a much more exact look at your inventory. I know it takes extra time, but it is the only way to shave a point or two here or there.
Mhm.
And as we now know, this industry is now death by paper cuts. And it is the race is won in pennies. So what you would use in time up front to get that system set up and to train your team on how to use it, it will pay you back in spades. I can find a problem in my food costs in 15 minutes, just simply through the back end.
Wow.
I don't even have to be on site to find it.
I
So
think
that's
many people
power.
don't connect their POS data to inventories. I don't think that's what most operators are doing.
Well, it's not necessarily, I mean, connecting yes, absolutely, because that's how you get the food cost number, your sales, divided minus inventory. But It's really more the costing every single recipe and connecting every single item from every single vendor to every single recipe. Because then what happens is that I get a, you know, a flag from the system that a price has gone up. I don't have to go looking. It tells me. Then I can go to my vendor and be like, hey, what's the deal? Why did I just pay double for that case of pork? Oh, I'm so sorry. That was a mistake. Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'll take that $500 back. So again, it's a game of pennies. And for anybody who's operating at 2 units and below, maybe that's not the way. But if your food costs are running away from you, you got to do it.
Hmm. What changes after 20,000, Sarah, that you said, hey, if it's above that, then you really should be looking at it? So just because percentually starts making sense
Cash flow.
to recover? Yeah,
Cash, pure cash. How you gonna pay the payroll? If you,
got it.
I mean, if you are a, you know, let's say that you're a small restaurant and you're doing 1 million a year. If you are carrying more than a $20,000 inventory, something is wrong, you know? And I know a lot of operators that don't even know how much inventory they're carrying. And that if you panic because you have too much inventory and you try to get rid of inventory, well, that messes up your food costs too. So staying steady is the name of the game. That's what you want. You don't want to go up and down. So it's that steadying that you're mastering. And first, you have to know exactly how much food you need to have a successful week. So I think that when you don't connect your sales numbers to your food cost numbers, you're never really going to know. I would argue that that alone, tracking it that detailed, that's 2 points on your bottom line.
Mhm.
Easy.
Yeah, I hear from operators that some of them feel like their food cost runs maybe 4, maybe 6 points above where they believe it should be. It doesn't sound like that's the case for you, but you still feel that you're running a little above what you would expect it to be.
No, we
Great.
work that number really hard. But also, again, we have the benefit of a menu that hasn't changed.
Hmm.
So we know it extremely well, you know, and that's also where like the loss of that data was catastrophic
Hmm.
because we use that data to predict our food and what we're going to buy.
Exactly.
Because we
Exactly.
also, my business is very seasonally oriented. When it rains, we get busy. When it's cold, we get busy. I sell hot soup, right?
Hmm.
So we have a different cadence and pace than pretty much any other restaurant in Nashville because of that, or in our town. So we have to use different ways for predicting how much food we have to have over a weekend. If we see it's going to be cold and rainy, we're like, whoop, here we go. Okay, we gotta double down. But then again, our restaurant can only hold so much food. You know, there's all of those things. So without the data of who purchased and when, you can't make those decisions.
Hmm. So that's fascinating. But even with such good control over your inventory, how often do you have to 86 menu items? Is that something that happens to you often that you run out, people order it, or
Yeah,
do you feel like that's rare?
it is rare. I think we know our business really, really well. But you know, the the consumer is unknowable, right? Like why, you know, they go from tonkatsu, the pork bone broth that we serve, that ramen being number one to the next week, a chicken ramen being number one. I can't predict that. So those are some predictors that are out of our control. And when that happens, that's usually when we see an 86. It's like,
Hmm.
wow, I don't know what happened this weekend, but everybody wanted, you know, shoyu, it's like chicken shoyu this weekend. They didn't want tonkatsu. So, but that can also be something as simple as like, there was a conference in town and everyone was Asian and they all wanted tonkatsu. So, you know, these are the kind of smaller predictors that we can't always zone in on.
Totally. When it does happen, how much does it cost you though? I mean, you lose the sale,
86?
but yes, exactly. But about the experience, does it impact the rest of the evening for you?
I don't think so. I think that once, I mean, maybe it does in to go and there's no way for me to know that.
Mm.
But in dine in, I mean, that's the other thing. You know, with mass development comes parking.
Hmm.
And now that we're monetizing every square inch of every city, you've already made the decision to leave your house rather than order online or cook something. You've put the kids in the car. You've just paid $3, $8 for parking. Now you're in my ramen shop. If I don't have the exact bowl that you want, you're probably going to get another bowl. But, you know, I would say that, like, honestly, my number one piece of advice to anyone who's thinking about starting a concept is make sure you understand how the taxes of your city work and make sure that you understand what parking's going to look like in 10 years.
Okay,
Hard to
so
know.
yeah, I mean, I see that you have such a good grasp on what's happening historically, but also where things are moving, and yet all of these challenges still come up. But to close the loop on the F&B piece, you know, kind of on the edge of it, but staffing and scheduling, is that something that you feel is a time sink for you, or is it relatively easy to manage at your schedule?
Manage that. My partner Todd does. He manages all of the scheduling. And, we use, so like my tech stack used to be pretty intense and now it's quite mellow. Like we used Restaurant 365 for a while. Woo! That system is just too big for us, way too big. And I also think that that type of enterprise system really requires you to be doing over $10 million a year in sales. End of story. If you're not, don't touch it. But I think that they've done well in the industry because of the mix of the accounting side and the operations side kind of being mixed together. But you have to hire really expensive bookkeepers to manage it. So then it becomes untenable. And now we have a company called Back Office that is a fraction of the cost. Doesn't require us to hire an outside bookkeeper. So there are still great companies out there for small business. I think that because I was in a growth mode, I was looking towards the future and like, no, I got to get this enterprise system set up now because when we get to this point, we're going to need it. And I just overshot it like
Mhm.
a lot. And so I had to back down from a lot of those larger systems. But the good news was that I understood them. So I understood what I was giving up and what I was gaining. So it wasn't, I mean, it was expensive, but it helped me to understand the structure of these systems so that I could go use one that was more affordable for me.
Okay. So, moving ahead and looking into the future, as you just mentioned, Sarah, well, first, what's one decision that you've actually made that has moved the needle for you? Besides this one, I mean, because this is a great example, but have there been other decisions like that you have made that you feel have been really, really solid?
In my 10 years as a total or recently?
Let's say the past 2 years.
Um, I feel like the past 2 years we have been recovering and stabilizing. So I'm not sure if we have really been I think I think one of the best decisions that I've made was not converting my original unit into a counter service restaurant. We have fought that tooth and nail, and that keeping it full service was the right thing to do. It was painful in the moment. We probably would have seen, it would have been a cash upfront, more commitment to the space, rehabbing the space. But one thing that I have learned with this concept and this business is that part of my job is not just to build something, but it's to build it and then never change it. That's what people want now. They want what they had before. They want what they remembered. It is emotional for people, and that it's my job to give them that. So where I used to always try to be thinking, what can I do next to like outmaneuver my competition or to be noticed again? I am much more focused on how can I make this experience the best for that person. It's much more individual now. We're thinking on a much more individual level, and that is helping us to regain the ground that we lost when we went into growth mode and we took our eyes off of the industry at large.
Mhm. Well, on the flip side of that question, is there anything that's being on your mind on the bucket list for you to fix, for you to improve about the way that your operation currently runs, and you just haven't had the time or maybe the focus or maybe even the solution to approach it? Is there anything
Our
like that?
reliance on third party,
Mm.
it's a problem, and I don't know how to reverse it because and I know I'm not alone. I'm just usually the only one that's willing to talk about it. I think that that is a big problem for a lot of operators now. Because, like I said, we used to make 99 cents on the dollar. Now we make 55 cents on the dollar. So, the third party organizations, they have extremely powerful algorithms. And there is nothing that I can do to convert that user. I can't. And I think that is the problem that I spend a lot of time thinking about is how can I service my value driven customers through my front door and not Uber's front door. And, it is really like a Goliath story. They have us they have us in chokehold. So that I think is, the problems like parking. They seem like, how are we going to solve this? I signed a lease with a developer that told me that they had enough parking, yet they don't. So, but the city gave them a thumbs up, but I still keep getting notes from customers saying that they can't find anywhere to park. So the problems that I deal with the most right now are the ones that I don't know if we can solve.
Mhm. Okay. So for an independent operator like you that's maybe new to this journey or has been here a while or maybe has some of the same struggles, what advice would you give them about how to modernize your operation? Because clearly there are many things that you're doing very well that are working out for you. So what would you tell them?
I think that as an operator, regardless of whether you have a partner or you're in the kitchen or you're not in the kitchen, regardless of where you are in the business, if your name is on the check, you need to understand how these systems work. And you have to get outside your comfort zone. I had to get outside my comfort zone to start this business. I had not worked a day in a restaurant in my life. Never went to culinary school. Had no formal background in this at all. So as much as I had to understand how a professional kitchen works, if you're a chef and you want to own a restaurant, you have to understand how the books work. And so I think that my number one piece of advice is master your profitability. Make it the thing that keeps you up till 2:00 in the morning, not your marketing, your profitability, because you see things there that will change the decisions that you make in every piece of the business. You can make a more deliberate decision based on understanding your books than you can on a bunch of pithy ideas or emotions that you might be feeling based on a shitty review that you got last night. So I think that the thing, like, I've never met anyone that has opened a restaurant or that owns a restaurant that is not a highly emotional person. So we have that fighting against us, but that is the thing to long-term survival, is to not let emotions drive your decisions. Work with data, work with numbers, work with realities. Don't work with ideas.
Great. That's a great one. So, Sarah, before I let you go, let's jump into a very quick lightning round. I want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind. No overthinking, just the first thing that pops up. So, most overrated thing in hospitality technology right now.
Loyalty programs.
Okay. What is the one system in that your operation could not run without? Toast?
Yeah, let's say toast. um, Yeah, I think honestly, like, yes, of course, Toast POS, but that plus the operations system for food costs.
Mhm. What is the best experience you've had at a restaurant that isn't your own, and what made it stand out for you?
Mm. I have been a little disenchanted with fine dining, and I think that happens to a lot of people that work in the industry. But I really find the most enchanting experiences that I have in food are extremely personal and small. And when I go to a taco truck or I go to a family-owned restaurant, those are the moments that I enjoy the most because I know how hard they're working. I know how personal it is, and I know what it took to get that plate of food out to me.
Sarah, last but not least, if you were in hospitality right now, what would you be doing?
I would be a research diver chasing whales in the ocean.
Wow, that's beautiful. I thought you'd say music. Back to music.
No, actually, I worked for Jacques Cousteau when I was young, so that's where I would head back to the ocean.
That's great. So on that note, Sarah, this is the end of the conversation. This is great. I thank you for being so candid and actually laying out all of these challenges that you're facing, what's happening with the industry, what's happening even with the city as a whole. That probably is happening all across the country, if I'm honest. So thank you for being so candid there. I really enjoyed the conversation. So where can our guests find you? Follow what you're doing, follow you on social media, even what you're doing at Otaku Ramen.
Yeah, so we're on Instagram and TikTok, Otaku Ramen, and I do a lot on my own personal feed as well. I've been doing a lot of self-publishing this year on Substack and with some different kind of fun ebooks because I think that there is just a lot of people out there that want to know more about how ramen is made and what it really is. And so that's been a lot of fun. My Substack is called Obsessed, and that's really where I just kind of like talk about my experience in hospitality and in my home kitchen.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for listening to Deep Current by Oceans. If you are a hospitality operator dealing with any of the challenges that Sarah has laid out today and want to keep that conversation going, find us at oceanscode.com. Until next time.